The girls were found, but no one knew the killer's identity or where he was now. In Utah, the population is formed mainly from Northern European ancestry. Utah's most prominent state university is the University of Utah, located in Salt Lake City, founded in 1850 as the University of Deseret. Bob Keppel will soon find that Ted moved to Utah in September of 1974. On October 2, 1974, the terror had begun in Utah. 16-year-old Nancy Wilcox, a pretty high school cheerleader, disappeared from the suburb of Holladay, just south of Salt Lake City. The authorities listed her as a probable runner because she had recently argued with her parents. She was last seen in a Volkswagen Bug. No description was offered for the man driving the Volkswagen. Friday night, October 18th, Melissa Smith, 17, the daughter of the police chief in Midvale, disappeared. Her body was discovered dumped in a Wasatch canyon, frozen, nude, and dirt-caked 10 days later. Still present was one of her blue knee-length stockings. It had become a ligature, tightly bound around her neck. She was covered with cuts and abrasions, some of them caused by blows from a heavy instrument used to crush her skull, others due to her body being dragged a considerable distance. Melissa had been raped and possibly sodomized. Dirt and twigs were found in her vagina. She had lost a lot of blood, evidence that she had bled heavily and probably died elsewhere. The medical examiner concluded that the girl was alive for a week after her disappearance. There were two possibilities, one of them being that Melissa was abducted and kept alive for a week, most likely in an unconscious state, based on the lack of ligature marks on her wrists and ankles. On Halloween night, Laura Amy, 17, attended a party with her friends in Orem, about 40 miles south of Salt Lake City. Around midnight, she decided to leave the party. No one saw her alive ever again. At around 7 p.m. on Friday, November 7th, Carol DeRanch, 19, was approached by a man who identified himself as Officer Roseland. She was at the Fashion Place Mall in Murray. Officer Roseland told her that an auto burglary was reported in the parking lot, and that she needed to come with him to see if it was her car or not. He then had told her to go to his car and drove her to the police headquarters. His car was a ratty, dented Volkswagen Bug, light blue, with an upholstery tear visible in the top of the rear seat. Inside the car, Officer Roseland had lunged for Carol, a pair of handcuffs in his hand. He managed to cuff her right wrist, but she fought with him, ripping her fingernails during the struggle. She somehow managed to get her door opened, but when she was halfway out of the car, he attacked her with a multi-pronged tire iron. With strength coming from pure terror, she managed to block his attack. Carol got out of the car, screaming, not knowing if he would follow her. She heard the car making a U-turn, and then disappearing. Then a couple discovered Carol DeRanch and drove her to the Murray police station. Later that night, 20 miles to the north in Bountiful, Deborah Kent, 17, watched a play with her parents at Viewmont High School. She had left to pick up her brother at around 10:30 p.m. That was the last time someone saw her alive. A handcuff key was found in the gravel outside the auditorium that fitted the cuffs on Carol DeRanch's arms. Also, at least one resident near the high school reported seeing a Volkswagen Bug with two people in it leaving the parking lot at high speed that night. On November 27th, another body was discovered in the mountains. The police notified Jim and Shirlene Amy. They drove to the University Medical Center in Salt Lake City, where Jim identified the body as his daughter, Laura. She had suffered multiple bruises and lacerations around her head and shoulders. Her injuries were similar to those discovered on Melissa Smith. There was a deep cut in the back of Laura's head, her jaw was broken, and a blunt instrument had fractured her skull. There was evidence of both anal and vaginal violation. One of her stockings was found knotted around her throat. After that, no new body was discovered. No new victim was taken. Had the killer stopped? The answer was no. January 12, 1975, Aspen, Colorado. Karen Campbell, a 23-year-old nurse from Michigan, was present with her fiancé and his 2 children at a medical convention. That night, the 4 of them were at dinner with another man, and she wanted to go back to their room to retrieve a magazine. No one knows what happened to her after that. 36 days later, 2 weeks before the 4 dead girls were found on Taylor Mountain in Washington, her body, nude and frozen, was found in a field of snow along a dirt road. Animals had eaten away much of her face and neck. Dr. Donald Clark, the Denver coroner, established that Karen had died from brain injury due to blunt trauma of the head. After Karen's body was found, Mike Fisher, chief investigator for Pitkin County in Aspen, connected his case with the killing in Utah and called Jerry Thompson, the detective responsible for the cases. On August 16, 1975, a young man who drove a gray Volkswagen was pulled over by Sergeant Robert Hayward after he tried to evade. The sergeant noticed that the front seat was lying on the back seat on its side, and on the floor he saw some tools such as a jimmy bar about 14 inches long. He then called for a county car to come over. The deputies made a more thorough search of the vehicle, and they found an ice pick, a pair of handcuffs, silk stockings with holes cut for the eyes and nose, and other items that a burglar might carry. The young man was booked at the county jail under the charge of attempting to evade a police officer. His name was Theodore Robert Bundy. Investigator Daryl Ondrak told Ted that he intended to pursue a warrant for possession of burglary tools. Still, the circumstances of his arrest made Ondrak mention the incident at the next weekly detectives meeting. That was when Jerry Thompson alone connected Ted's arrest and Carol Duranche's abduction. Twice before in Seattle and Salt Lake City, Ted's name surfaced in connection with the killings, but was dismissed. But Thompson had a long road to run before making the arrest. He needed the victim to identify Ted. Before approaching the victim, Thompson wanted to be more confident of what he might have. He then sent Ted's mugshot and a photo of the articles found in his car to Bob Keppel in Seattle. Coincidentally, at the instant Keppel heard from the Utah detective, he and his team were turning to suspect number 7 of the top 100 possible Teds that they were rechecking. Suspect number 7 was Theodore Robert Bundy. On August 21st, Daryl Ondrak presented at Ted Bundy's house with an arrest warrant for possession of burglary tools. He took Ted to be fingerprinted, photographed again, and booked. After the procedure, Ted was taken to an interview room. Ben Forbes, Thompson's partner, was present. Forbes informed Bundy that he was a kidnapping and attempted murder case suspect at the end of the interview. After that, things started to go down for Ted. The evidence against him began to pile up. Now Thompson had access to all the pieces of information from all the detectives involved in the cases from Washington, Utah, and now Colorado. Together, they formed an astonishing conclusion. Theodore Robert Bundy, a courteous law student, was the man they were looking for all this time.